He just trying to get a conversation started, man. He just trying to get a conversation started. Get over it.
Right. That's what the brother gave it to me. Yeah. I'm just trying to bait you in. That's somebody like, okay, well, I'll tell you what it is. That's how I found out. Tell you, somebody wrong. Reverse psychology. Is that what it is? No, but you. I was hungry before you were kidding.
Okay, so the first thing that we're going to do this morning is, of course, entertain a question. The question this morning is, how can we proactively practice safeguarding our tongues? But before we do that, I would like to ask all of you this morning that we make a dua for Brother Qais, in new addition to his family. What? Go ahead.
I know a baby.
No, it's a child.
No, a baby. Oh. I know, I'm just messing with him. I'm trying to get him back for something, you know.
Anyway, yeah.
You know, Abdul Shakur Aquil lost his daughter.
Yes. Yeah. Oh. No, okay. Anyway, so we are welcoming a new addition to our family, our Quba family here. We ask that Allah make her a righteous believer, a good Muslimah, and a woman who grows up and honors her parents and her family. And that's what matters. We have these beautiful children. That's the kind of stuff that we have to put in them early. So we ask that. Congratulate you and the family, brother. And of course, our condolences to Imam Apil. He lost his adult daughter, Layla. And death is always a sad time, but it's also.
Is the one in Egypt?
No.
Okay.
The brothers involved us in finance.
Yes.
To try to get it.
So whenever we hear, that someone passes, it's really ultimately it's a reminder. It's a reminder for all of us that are living, because we don't know what our lifespan is. And the deception and the delusion of this world, we talked about the dunya a few weeks ago, and particularly in this time, there's an idea called, so there's kufr, and we talk about kufr a lot as believers. And, there's a manufacturing of kufr, right? So kufr can be engineered, right? It's an attitude, it's an outlook, and the messages of this belief are really potent. They occur a lot. You have to be very careful. Part of the main thing that we have to be careful of is that we don't forget that our life has a purpose. And once we understand the purpose, that we stay focused on that purpose. And so we look at death differently than other people who don't believe the same way. Right? So we mourn, but at the same time we realize that we are all spirits that are having a physical experience, a physical world. And when we leave here, we leave this realm, the spirit leaves. It goes somewhere else. It goes where Allah has destined for it to go. So back to your question. How can we proactively practice safeguarding our tongues? Sabria, you work with Mom, Jada and Fatima in the corner, Regina and Fatima, Tiffany, and Sabrina, the two of you together, and Sister Janice and Ayana. I have the number right?
Yeah.
Okay. And then Brother Salim, Brother Aziz, and then the three brothers, Vernon, Hakeem, and Brother Muhammad.
What, give us a question one more time.
Okay, so the question one more time. How can we proactively practice safeguarding our time?
See.
So last week, what did we talk about? One of the things that we talked about last week was backbiting, slander, right, vulgar, right. So how do we practice guarding our tongue?
Yes, we have Sister Saida, Sister Zainab, Sister Naima, and yeah, that's it.
Okay. You got the question?
Yeah, the question, yes.
Okay. Let's go. Pause.
Brother Kais,
Sister Saida,
can you block them from listening to us and let us talk to each other?
no, not in this, not in this media.
Okay, because it's really by the time we type to interact, they've moved on.
Okay, so what I can do is y'all can speak. I can lower it down here, and y'all can speak, and you won't hear them. But yeah, I'll just lower here while y'all speak to each other.
We can speak to each other without them hearing us, and then you can turn it back on so somebody can speak.
Yes.
Can you do that now?
I've done it.
Assalamu alaikum, Sister Naima. Congratulations. You're like my grandmother. I can't hear you. Zainab.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I hear you now.
Okay. Alhamdulillah, Shukran. How are you?
Alhamdulillah. I'm happy to hear you. When I hear you, baby, inshallah, she'll be a source of wonder for your family. Sister Zainab, are you there?
Yeah, assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam wa rahmatullah. So I wanted to this question really touched me because once upon a time I had a conversation with Sister Fatima Abdul Malik, who was in the class, and we talked about this very subject because she shared something personal with me. And since the conversation with Sister Fatima, I always try to remember that we are human and we do this. So anytime I find myself a part of that, I remember Fatima, and I try to remind people gently that we shouldn't do that. Do you guys have similar experiences?
Saida, I didn't hear the question. Could you repeat what his question was?
The question was, how can we proactively to safeguarding our tongues? Sister Fatima reminded me, Fatima Abdul Malik reminded me long time ago that we have to remind each other.
Definitely.
Yeah, I think for me, I try not to, I don't talk a lot in terms of like social settings and in like on the phone and like those types of things where you would do that. So I think for me, the biggest thing I try not to do is just not to put myself in a situation where like I'm doing that, if that makes sense. But, like I don't
It
know.
does. It does in the fact that you are consciously trying, but the role of your husband in the community puts you in a situation that you must step out front and try to lead and help guide, and you must interact because other women perceive as and uninvolved, and they perceive us as feeling as we're better than them if we don't engage. So it affects the community, but I watch you, I admire you for what I see, for what I see you trying to do. But I'm concerned because I see you and my co-wife, Iman, she does pretty much the same thing. I'm wondering how you guys will emerge from that position because you must do it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I participate. Like, I definitely participate in all the community functions, and I think that I try to take leadership roles. But I'm speaking more about like I don't speak on the phone like that. Like that's not something that I.
Can you talk for us, Naima?
Um, look at just before you say anything, look at yourself in the mirror. You don't have any, thoughts or in company of, I say in the company of people that although that might not be your character, but as human beings, if we sit in the company, you may add something to it. With to a law, go to a law, and it was the how do you want to eat the flesh of your brother. I think that's.
Yeah. We spoke a lot about the attitudes that we learned from our elders, and then it all came back to what we want for ourselves, we want for our brothers and sisters, and so what I want someone saying these kinds of things about me, and we heard it, the power of words. Words can be weapons, or words can be
The what?
words can be weapons to destroy
I'm glad
people.
you brought that up.
You don't want to be held accountable for the destruction of somebody else, and really to fear the punishment of Allah and to prevent ourselves or to proactively engage is really to ask Allah for the power not to do this, for the strength not to do this. Because it's human to be critical of other people, and so we have to fight against that. That we are not to fight against that. That's part of ourselves.
So, critical. That's an important word. Okay. Regina, Fatima.
So Sister Fatima and I were saying, be mindful of what you say, but also your body language, like what you're not saying, with your facial expressions and things of that nature, and be critical of yourself, like she said. Also, be conscious of how you say and what you say, because words get hurt, and lean to what you hold on to something somebody say for the rest of your life. Practice restraint and self-control. And my sister was also saying previously, she was telling me like, cause I talk fast, and she said like I got phones on, teleprompter of like what to say. I always have something. So just being mindful that you will be, your mouth will speak for itself on the day of judgment. It's going to say everything you made it say, everything you didn't want to say. So just kind of redirecting, and for me, talking slower and just thinking a little bit more about what I actually need to say as opposed to what I want to say.
Excellent. Excellent. What's your name? What's your name? What's your name?
Reagan. She said Reagan.
Reagan? Oh, okay. What's your name?
Reagan. She said her name was Reagan, and she said her name was Reagan.
Her name is?
Rain.
Rain and Reagan. Welcome to the class.
Thank you.
You know this is a class, right? Okay.
Next one.
Yes.
Sister Stephanie and Tiffany, what did you guys come up with?
Sister Stephanie said bigger.
Okay.
Works for her.
How?
It keeps me still, allows me to think, and just keeps me prayerful, so that I don't just
Word out.
So
So think before you act.
think before you act.
Think before you act. For me.
But it's hard to do because it takes some practice, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Those of us that can talk and talk well, right? It takes some exercise, right? You have to exercise your strength. Good. What else?
Yeah, she said stop and think, and that requires having some kind of awareness.
Having some type of
awareness.
Awareness.
And I said something that I heard in the class a couple weeks ago, where the chef was saying that we should count our words. I don't know if he meant that literally, but kind of what I took from it is that basically being mindful of how you're saying things. And we can use the example of opposite of thumb where we have Hadith where he's saying, but he didn't have to go on a long rant to get the message across. So basically, in our communication, making sure we're having meaningful conversations and staying away from counting our words that way, staying away from things that are pointless. Conversations that are pointless. And then when we're in these meaningful conversations, taking a break to think about what's the best way, the most concise way. In some instances, sometimes brevity is a virtue, but also sometimes being a little bit more thorough in their speech is a virtue as well. So kind of whatever the situation calls for, like for instance, this situation, same
You was talking about that? What was that?
She said she's saying too many words.
Yeah.
Oh.
Right now. I could have been more brief, is what I'm saying.
Right, but see, okay, so there's a difference because I think that we have to consider the role that emotion plays, right, in all of this. And oftentimes, when we find ourselves saying the wrong things, it's usually in certain contexts, certain engagements, right? So it's in anger, right? If someone does something and they offend us, or they hurt our feelings, or whatever, and we find ourselves feeling maybe justified because we're dealing with ourselves, that in this context, I can say whatever because I'm angry, right? Or in the context of joking, right? Where we're very relaxed and, we may take liberties, we let the tongue go because we don't manage our words the same way when we're in a class, for example. If someone asks you to do a presentation, do a lecture, you're going to do your best to prepare words, and that notion of keeping track of your words, you're more conscious of it because your focus is more deliberate. So we'll talk a little bit more about context, but keep that in mind, that anger, because you said something about awareness. And spiritual awareness is recognizing that the context. So awareness is beneficial when you realize that if I'm angry, right, I have to be more mindful of what I say in a state of anger. Because in a state of anger, I'm going to say things that I will regret. Not maybe, no, I will regret them. So, that's the discipline part of it, right? So we're talking about the disciplining. You discipline yourself because we all struggle with that. This is why when we began this discussion, we said that the Prophet, peace be upon him, said what? If you can guarantee me two things, if you safeguard two things, your tongue and your private, I can guarantee you Jannah, because that is a jihad within itself. Okay, that is a jihad within itself. Fatima and Jada.
Jada and I looked at each other and kind of smiled because everybody said everything we said.
Okay.
Jada said, being conscious of the company you keep and thinking before you speak. And I said, first realizing that you have to actually, that there's accountability attached to what you say, and to actually physically pause before you speak. Because if you just, kind of like that, if you just, blurt off the top of your head and not consciously thinking about what comes out of your mouth before, you say it, you're likely to say things, and to actively make bigger. Because if you're saying good things, then if you're actively spending time saying good things and different, then that
make up your mind not to say other things.
Right. But see, and that's true, but we also have to remember that we don't dicker 24 hours a day, even if we make an intention to do that.
Right.
Oftentimes we find ourselves engaged in conversations, right? So the dicker part is more of a rescue word. The dicker part is what we say whenever we slip up. Because we're going to slip up. You know how sometimes you'll be in the middle of a conversation and it'll, why am I talking about this? Let me just stop. And you'll just stop talking. And then that's when the dicker is of the best benefit, because you're sort of like redirecting yourself to where your frame of mind should be. Because a lot of this stuff is connected to your frame of mind, right? And so that's a part, but that's excellent. Good. Well, what about the brothers? I know, brother, we don't have that problem, right? We don't talk too much.
Yes, we do.
That was a test, by the way.
As I wanted to, this question came up because I would like to apologize to Kais and his family. I didn't mean what I said, and just it's really deep that this is what you brought it up on, and I just made that same mistake. You know what I said about the polygamy thing? You know, I forgot all about that. Well, I'm just using an example because that's what we were talking about. Well, I like to correct myself.
Okay.
I would apologize to him, but I'm just want to apologize to him. That was wrong, but that's an example of saying something I didn't think, and
right.
I was real stupid, and I apologize.
Okay.
And I feel like a donkey over the border. Anyway, it says, how can we proactively practice safeguard? Think about the impact of something before you say it, which you didn't do. And don't say something you may regret saying later, which I did.
Prime example, huh?
Yeah, I know, so I'm dogging myself. Is it apologize something?
You already said this out.
Oh, I didn't. I didn't know, because
he has your picture right there.
You sweat.
You got my picture there.
I'm joking.
See? He started them now. The little man on the show. That's it, I'm done.
That's it? Can you have something to add?
Yeah, well, I was just, I was real general about it. I said, don't get involved in gossip, don't listen to stuff that doesn't concern you. And then I was thinking about the verse, if you don't have knowledge of something, ask somebody who knows, speak without knowledge. Other one was, there was a hadith that said, if you know something and you're correct about it, you speak about it and you're not right, position.
Right.
It says, take a seat and help fire.
They're asking you to speak up, just a little. Speak up a little. That last part that you said.
There's a hadith that says, if you have knowledge about something, even if you're correct about it, and if you're not in the right authority, it says, take a seat in hellfire. If I'm interpreting it right, I don't know. But
okay.
Other thing I said was, if you don't have knowledge about something, ask somebody who knows.
Right.
Don't speak without knowledge.
Right. So the second one that you mentioned is an actual verse from the Quran. The second part. If you don't know something,
Right.
ask it, right? The first one is a hadith.
Right.
But that is related specifically to knowledge that the person claims came from the Prophet. Or so, in other words, if you're speaking authoritatively about something that Allah said, or that the Prophet said, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and you don't have the knowledge, then you're held accountable for that. Especially if this is haram or this is obligatory, and you don't know, right? And what this speaks to is the responsibility of transmitting knowledge. That you got to know what you're talking about, right?
And I said, if you get angry, then just pause before you blurt out something.
Right. Okay. Vernon, what's your name? William.
I remember something my father told me a long time ago. He said, you keep your mouth shut, only person knows you're full is yourself. Once you open your mouth, everybody knows. So you think about, you pause for a second. People say count to 10. She paused for the, if what I'm about to say is it worth saying? What's the benefit of anything?
Right. You want to add anything, Brother William? No? Okay. What about online?
What about us?
We're coming around. We're mixing it up. I'm mixing it up.
Okay, so we spoke about Sister Saida. Can you hear me? Mindful that to be mindful that we are all human beings, and so people will make this error, but to consistently remind each other like that this is not what we should be doing. And then also we spoke about just not putting yourself in a situation where those conversations happen often. So if you are someone who talks on the phone a lot, and that happens a lot on the phone, like just reducing those type of settings for yourself so that you are not in those scenarios.
That's it.
Yep.
Well, I want to take a moment because this happened to me.
Naima, mute yours so we can hear Sister Saida. Go ahead, Sister Saida.
I said this is something that affected me personally, and I want to thank Fatima Abdul Malik, who is sitting in that class, I hope. Many years ago, Fatima taught me about personal issue that I was sharing with her. And Fatima said that we had a responsibility to remind each other, to take care about our tongues, that she had learned that over some years. And at the time, what she was saying to me was difficult to listen to, but I listened to Fatima, and it changed me. It changed my life. It changed my perspective of what I should do with other sisters. To remind other people, because it was also a reminder to myself. And I always think about Fatima in that regards, because I feel that if you have a chance to go to paradise, you go because other people help you go. Nobody is Muslim alone. And so I encouraged the young people online with me to take a risk, to begin to do that. It's difficult when you're young. I was much younger, so was Fatima, but she took a risk on our relationship to tell me something that was in her heart. And since Fatima did that with me, I take that risk.
Excellent.
Oh.
Excellent. Excellent. That's an excellent contribution. Excellent. Okay. Well, I'm not trying to get beat up after class, so.
No, just get beat up after class.
No, vote. How you know that?
I'm gonna protect you. Yeah, you the teacher, we don't really need to do
it.
Trying to get back in now.
Okay.
All right. The key part of your question is the word practice.
Yes.
And that's where we started out. Our thoughts is that, and as we were doing that, you were writing that on the board, and we were saying, okay, that's what practice means to us, because that's where we're trying to go.
That's right.
And in the meantime, we have to do things like a couple of people said, pause before you speak, and that's what I have to do, because I have a tendency sometimes just saying things. But at least if you pause, you'll give that thought some thought before it turns into words.
Right.
And then where is that thought coming from?
Right.
Is that a good thought?
Excellent.
Or is that Shaitan's suggestion?
So what's a good determiner of where the thought is coming from?
What would the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ have done?
But I'm talking about you personally.
Oh.
What would be a good determiner for you?
Where the thought came from?
Yeah.
The nature of the feeling of the thought.
Emotional state.
The way the thought feels.
Right.
If it feels good, then give it some more thought,
Right.
see if it's something you should say.
Right.
If there's any pause in what you think you should say, don't say it.
Right.
you know.
Excellent.
And then there are times when things should be said, but they should be said at the right time.
Uh-huh.
You can have much more impact when you say something that needs to be said if you have patience enough to wait for the timely moment.
That's right. So a part of it is, so I like the fact that you focused on practice, because practice, discipline, practice. And so what we're practicing is self-discipline.
Right.
Right? And so a part of it is an honesty about what our strengths are.
Yep.
Because Sister Sage's contribution was very touching because it spoke to a personal encounter.
Right.
Right? Where there was growth. And oftentimes, you know, because we should remind each other. So let's say you have a friend that you're close to, and you love everything about him or her. And the only problem that you have is that she talks too much. Like she tends to always bring people's business to you, right? Always got something to say. So a part of how what you said, and I'm connecting it to what Sister Saida said, the right time is always connected to, no, the right way is connected to the right time. You see? And so, because when we think about our engagements with one another, right, the potential is always that the goodness is always present.
Right.
But we have to focus consciously on the goodness.
Right. Right.
Right? Because a conversation that happened years ago, you maybe didn't even give it the thought or the weight that it was received in. You just were speaking from your heart, and yet that's something that touched someone in a meaningful way and led to personal growth. That's real. That's real. So what you're saying, I'm interpreting it as, you know, we should not trivialize the impact of what we say to folk. Right? And so there's a positive as well as a negative. The negative relates to, you know, our state, our emotional state. And the two of the worst emotional states are, you know, anger, where we're like really revved up, and joking. Not that joking is haram, but when we're really, really relaxed, you know, we tend to just say stuff. Right. You know. Okay, well, excellent. You have anything else?
We had a couple more things. Consider the source. Is the situation consistent with what you know? Mm-hmm. Like if he says something, he comes to me and tells me something about you. Mm-hmm. You know, I'm thinking, is that consistent with Imam Anwar, the Anwar I know? Mm-hmm. You know, even before I speak about it, you know. And like he said, just be solid. Don't feed into anything.
Right.
You know.
Right.
That was
Excellent. Excellent.
I have something I'd like to add. Early on, when I first come through the doors, the elders here, may Allah be pleased with them. They told me, said, if you see two or more people having a conversation, and they're not talking about Allah, they're talking about somebody else. And, yeah. And if you, proactivity means to me, a group of people, conversations that has nothing to do with nothing, to avoid that. And you see that's phenomenal. Yeah. People just talking and talking and talking. And it's not just attributed to the women, men talk and talk and talk.
Absolutely.
Okay. So
I'm a witness to that.
Yeah. So,
what?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Don't be surprised.
Yeah.
Probably worse.
And they talking about nothing.
That's right. Okay, Sabrina, Sabora.
When we talk a lot about practice and what that means, and the first thing that comes to my side was fasting more often. Because a lot of times when you're fasting, you don't really have that same, for some reason, desire to be as talkative. And you're a lot more reflective about what you put your energy into. And then also, if you're unable to fast, but I don't know if anybody ever done it before, but having those days or periods of silence where you don't need to talk and your goal is not to talk, and literally making that your goal for the day. Like, I'm only talking when it's absolutely necessary. And then being reflective about when people are communicating with you, what typically would be your response, and saying, okay, so if I would have said that typically, what would have been the outcome of it?
Right. Excellent.
There was one more thing online. I think Zainab said something about it's not only, like a lot of the conversation has been going around about backbiting and stuff like that, but not just what is said, not just about saying things, but saying things that that may cause somebody to feel hurt by it. So even how you say certain things,
Right.
to indicate tone, right? So even if it's something that is true, you want to pass on, whatever, let's say however you want to term it, being very cautious as to how you say it. And one of the things, just to add on to what brothers, or just to jump on what Brother Salim said, and even what Zainab is saying here, ask yourself, is this beneficial to the person? Is this beneficial? Will this move us closer to our Lord in any way, shape, or form? And I'm not speaking about in this, that's the only thing we speak about, but if it's something that is sensitive, something that could potentially cause some ill feelings, what is the overall goal or impact behind this? Will this thing really move us closer to some ultimate goal? And if it isn't, then, as people have been saying, it's a moment of pause, and almost like work yourself into that mode of proactively thinking, I am going to ask myself these questions when I'm in a situation, right? So I think it's, for me, when I hear you say proactively, it's this idea of training yourself to be in that mindset when it comes up.
Sorry to interrupt you, but what mindset?
A mindset of, there are different words for it right now. A mindset of presence, a mindset of mindfulness, a mindset of consciousness, a mindset of, so all of these words mean when it happens.
You're leaving something critical out there. I want you to say a mindset of mindfulness, a mindset of awareness, and what was the third one? A mindset of consciousness.
But tell me and I'll say it.
Mindfulness of right? So connecting your words and deeds to your intention. That's where the mindfulness comes from. Right? Because it's something that we take for granted that Allah hears all. We may take for granted that Allah knows all. But part of Allah knowing all means that even if I say my intention is one thing, Allah knows what the real intention is, and I should always be mindful of that fact that Allah knows. So this is why it's worth the investment, because long term you're investing in your own spiritual well-being on the day of judgment. Okay, but this has all been really, really good stuff. Yes.
I think that sometimes silence can also be interpreted a certain way. Silence or silence in response to a question or something that someone does can also be interpreted a certain way. So, and it may not always be good. So, I mean, what do you do with that?
Well, so now we're expanding into kind of communication and modes of communication, and that's a little broad for today.
Okay.
But it may come up, an answer may come up, because we're going to read a little bit, so an answer may come up to that question. So, go ahead, Fatima.
I think that the mindfulness also goes into what you watch and what you subconsciously take in, because I feel like we have a culture that breeds insensitivity. Like in general, we have a culture that breeds insensitivity. Like even on the little kid shows, like I constantly have to say to my kids,
I'm like, what did you just say to him? And they're like, what? I just said this. And they're like, realize that what you just did was you made fun of this person, or you did this, or you did that.
Right,
It's like, you know how you watch TV and it's like a sitcom, you got the audience that laughs in the background, because like the little quips and stuff like that people say. That's being, even from little, like, it's just so much we take it in, we don't realize that it's just,
it's subconscious.
Yeah, it's subconscious, like, and you're being rude to someone, you're mocking someone, all of these little things that we do, we take in, we absorb it in ourselves, and it becomes okay.
Right.
So, like, even this guiding thing that people, somebody does this, everybody wants to shout out guiding. Like, I have to pull kids aside to say,
what?
Guiding. You ever heard anybody say that?
Like, got that.
Like, guiding. Yeah, like, you'll hear
Guiding.
somebody, and then everybody else laughs, and it's like, realize.
Now I know what my kids are saying the other day.
Yeah. All the time. Even little kids say it. And it's like, sometimes it's okay. It's like, okay, you're joking with your friends, blah, blah, blah. But most of the time when it's said, you're humiliating somebody.
Right.
It's like, it's done, but it's done in a way, it's so commonplace. The kids are like, what? I was just kidding. I'm like, no, you can't be just kidding.
Right.
Because, you know, a Muslim's supposed to be safe from your tongue. A Muslim's supposed to be safe from this, and the things that you're doing is not, you're humiliating people. So it's just that consciousness.
So I think that in order to be conscious or more conscious, you have to understand the value of consciousness, right? And so that's why you heard me say a little earlier that today in the world, not just in the United States, in the world, you know, we can't forget that, you know, we're talking about consciousness of the believer. But I mentioned the social engineering of disbelief. And how is that communicated? Well, one of the mediums is television and movies and, you know, things that we may perceive as innocent. And, you know, by no means am I a person that says television is haram or anything like that. But what I do say to people, and I try to enforce it in my home, is that that's a very powerful medium. Extremely, and you have to respect that.
Yep.
Like, you cannot just engage with this medium because it's a sophisticated way.
Yep.
All the conversations that we're having are basic conversations. There's a sophisticated method of transmitting communication, right? Very sophisticated. The Prophet ﷺ one time said to the companions to beware of words. He said, for verily, some forms of eloquence or rhetoric are enchanting. And what do we say? Somebody can mesmerize you with their words. That's because words have that potential. Go ahead.
No, and I think, you know, it comes out of this idea, and sometimes people boast on, right, that you would hear them say, I can sell sand to a nomad, right? Or I can, exactly, or Iceland Eskimo. So it comes out of this idea that I can speak so well that I can get anything I want to come to happen. And stuff.
That's right. And so one time the Prophet, why did he say this? Because even during his time, and he was first sent amongst the people who were masters of rhetoric. The Bedouin Arabs of that time, they were masters of rhetoric. They were oral tradition people. They were masters of oral rhetoric, right? And some of his companions, when he would arbitrate between them, invariably when two people came before him, it was always possible that one person was more eloquent than the other. So he warned them, some of you may mesmerize me with your making of your case and cause me to judge unfairly. So you should know that in the case that you do that, meaning you know that you're unjust in your request, but you use your ability to make your case to take something that's not yours. That was one of the instances where you will have a handful of coal, hot coal on the day of judgment. Okay? Because that's, you know, even the prophet was not immune.
Right.
Because he was a human being. Someone could come and say whatever. And he may hear it, And so that was his disclaimer. When you come to me in my capacity as arbiter, or be sure to come right. That's why we talked about intentionality.
Going back to something Sister Sabria, she reminded me of something back in the 70s, early 70s, before I became Muslim. I was involved in the theater.
Mm-hmm.
And the day of a performance, I wouldn't talk all day long.
Mm-hmm.
I would save my voice for the power of the projection for the performance.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember how I felt then. And she just mentioned it. It's a very powerful practice.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost like Ramadan.
Mm-hmm.
To go through the whole day consciously not speaking. Mm-hmm. It's very powerful. It's something that everybody should try sometime.
No, well, really, in today's society, right? Because we have to consider the times, right? So today there are appropriate things that we should say. There are different mediums through which we can say them.
Mm-hmm.
So today, besides Tiffany picking up the phone and calling Regina and saying, "Good morning, big sister. How are you today?" She could text it. She could text it. She could email it. She could Facebook post it. She could Twitter it. She could Periscope it. She could Snapchat it. All of these are means. All of these are means of communication. So we've had an expansion in the means through which, or the modes through which we're able to communicate with one another. So the opposite is true, right? The opposite is true. So all of these discussions and these words about the practice, right? The care, right? Because see, the danger of some of these mediums is that when you sit down to write something, intentionality is even more important, because now you're taking the thought out of your head and constructing it on paper. So you know what it looks like, and you have a better idea of what it feels like, right? So Facebook, Twitter, texting, right? So by extension, the negative aspects of bad communication, are the same, right? Because the medium doesn't matter. So something that you shouldn't say, you really shouldn't text. Something, because oftentimes people are lured into this sense of, well, if I say it from behind the screen or through behind the keyboard, then there's a barrier. Well, I didn't really mean it like that. You just read the words wrong, right? Whereas I may have meant it exactly how it came off. That was my intention. Right? So that all of these are things, and we all have to be mindful. Part of what I do, I speak for a living, right? And so I've been through a range of experiences as a young khatib, as an older khatib now, a person that talks, and I go around and I've learned some hard lessons about really the power of words and the care. And so I'm a linguist by training, so I had a theoretical appreciation. But then, talking to people for a living and understanding how central communication is to our existence, what words mean in Islamic context, right? So a long time ago, like one of the first notions that I had to challenge was this false assumption that, so a long time ago, when I was in grade school, I was like second, third grade, I used to get picked on a lot, right? So some of the elders would tell me, boy, don't worry, just toughen up. And the first time I was 6 stones may break my bones, but words can never hurt me, right? And then as I got older, it's like, no, that's not right. The words hurt. Like you said, I still remember. Big head, bubble head, all that stuff. I still remembered it, right? So I've come to believe that that's a fallacy. Because words, one of y'all said meaningful conversations. Somebody else said words can be weapons. And oftentimes they are used as weapons. You know, so in the context of warfare, you have physical warfare, then you have psychological warfare, then you have spiritual warfare. The elements that these things have in common, some of the elements, particularly psychological and spiritual, is that the medium is words. So we have to take care. Fatima mentioned about the messages that the kids are exposed to. And of course, in today's world, we can't protect our children from everything. But we can certainly protect our children from the things that we protect ourselves from. Right? And especially today. So from in my experience, you know, cartoons. When I was younger, cartoons was something else. And then like my kids and like some of what they consider cartoons, and we've had discussions and some of the dialogue in the cartoon. And I'm like, wow. For someone to say this is not deliberate, how can it not be? How can you attach, you know, the images of innocence? You know, the graphics, the drawings, you know, particularly in Westerns, because the Eastern people have a different, you know, approach, right? But things that are normally interpreted as innocent, when you listen to the words, and it's there's something behind this, right? There's something behind this, and the nature of being subliminal is that it's sophisticated, right? And so the connecting that I make, it goes back to what the prophet said about words can be enchanting. And the same way, a poet could write a poem 2,000 years ago, and if it survived the time and landed in our hands, it can have those of us that read it will say, oh wow, somebody said it 2,000 years ago. Well, just imagine now that we add imagery to all of the senses, because it used to be that the words were it was the hearing, right? But now if you're hearing and watching, you know, that just heightens the engagement, right? And so we first must respect the power of words. And this is why we take responsibility, right? Because the words are powerful. They have the potential to be hurtful, but they also have the potential to be extremely healing. Right? And so part of us practicing or proactively safeguarding our tongues is looking at this hadith. Right? Whoever believes in the law in the last day should speak good or keep quiet. So the caveat here, not that we're adding anything to the words of the prophet, but to sort of unpack this a little further, you speak good, because when you speak good, that's a broad thing. It's sort of like going back to Clayton's contribution. A good word at the right time. A good word at the right time.
There's a saying about that, right? A good word at the right time says what?
Who said it?
It just sounds familiar. No?
Is it Alan saying?
Could be.
Hey,
you know what I find?
I guess there's that.
Yeah, no, that's not. No. Yeah, you'll find out. So,
as a side, I wanted to say something when you're finished.
Okay, that's the good stuff, right? So you speak good. And why is this a good thing? Not just because of the potential to make somebody feel good or help them, but more importantly, if we go back to what Qais said about being more conscious, more aware of Allah, that it reframes. So now what you say you are in fact blessed for, you get reward. You get reward, right? So, or keep quiet. Now keeping quiet here means if it's not something good, then you don't say anything. right? Right.
So this was kind of reminding me of the Eid Quba, I think like 2 years ago for Ramadan, for Eid. But and the critique was talking about that a quality of the Sahaba was that any wealth that you asked of them, they would give you. But time, they were a lot more protective of. And how it seems like the reverse is true today, where people have no problem sitting around wasting hours or, with this person or that person, but if someone comes to them asking them some kind of monetary contribution or whatever, that this is where they draw the line. And so it just made me think about when we're conscious about how we're spending our time, in addition to what we're saying. What's more important? Is the wealth more important, or all of these kind of other things that we're kind of putting priority on, and we're not willing to slip up on, but we're willing to slip up on what we say, we're willing to slip on what we're doing with our time.
Okay, this is Saida, and then we'll go back. Go ahead. This is Saida.
Well, I wanted to go back to what Sabria said about not talking, and the brother, I don't know him, I'm sorry, who commented about what happened in the 70s, and I do remember that in the 70s, in my community in North Jersey, we practiced not talking. We practiced not talking and instead to think. And I think what Sabria said is very important, because it's easy to think about what you say before you say it, but most people don't spend enough time not talking at all. Right. So they don't connect to what they think because they don't spend time thinking. Excellent. Not talking helps you spend more time thinking. Yeah. And you've talked about not just orally talking, but not texting, not engaging in conversations with other people. I think that she's provided us a very important point about how we should think about communication. And the first thing is to do is to learn yourself. And if you're always talking, you can't know yourself.
Right. And so I'm glad you brought that back up, because actually what Sabria touched on, so there's like something that's considered sort of like a maxim in Sufism, where the ultimate purpose of it is to perfect the practice of silence and solitude. Silence and solitude. Now, of course, we're socialized, right? Solitude, weird, right? You're that loner guy, you watching you because we don't know, you might flip out. Why that sister always by herself? Why, if you disappear, you come back, what you been up to, right? But solitude oftentimes are the times when we are alone with our thoughts and alone with ourselves, and we can make the time to engage in a form of self-critique. And self-critique is not to be understood as somebody mentioned critical. Who said the word critical? I wrote it down. Sister Stephanie, did you? Sister Julie said it? It came in someone over here saying. But the critique is not negative, right? Self-critique can be negative, and it's if you have stuff and you know you got stuff, you own your stuff. That can be, so it's negative only in the sense that it can be a negative if you think you don't have no stuff to own. But then, really, you're delusional because none of us is perfect, right? But if you're not you're a healthy person, you have good stuff, you have bad. So the ownership starts with, okay, well, this is what I know I'm weak at. This is what I know is a challenge for me, right? I might be a person that just talks without thinking, and I love to talk. And I find myself, maybe in a moment of solitude, reflecting on conversations that I had that I just wish I never had. Why was I a part of that conversation? Why is my name always in the middle of some stuff? right? So maybe Jada and Fatima, you guys talked about the company. Who am I around where this just keeps ending up with me? And it's important because all of you, I think, agree that, you know, society sort of encourages that. I mean, you have whole industries built around gossip.
Yeah.
And someone else's business that has nothing to do with you. You don't know them, you don't know their family, you don't know anything. And you're all in it. You know, and then no, it's okay. It's okay, go ahead.
I was gonna say, you know, our society, we're flooded with stuff to the point where, you know, if you're a big TV watcher, one of those shows, The Housewives.
Oh my God.
And and that's all, you know, all vicarious, you know, looking at people's nonsense.
Did you say that?
You know, but I mean, we're flooded with those messages.
That's right.
And there's not the idea, or I think there's an intent, well, I should say, I think there's an intention to flood us so that there's not intentional thought and awareness, and there's not a focus on a lot because you're busy caught up in Michigan.
That's right.
That you're stuck.
There you go.
And so, you know, it's really quite horrifying.
Yeah.
But in reference to what Fatima was saying, even with our children, because they have no. Children need structure, and they don't have boundaries, they don't have filters.
They don't have filters.
So, you know, we're clearly, you know, most of society is influencing our children to fall into this cultural stuff, you know, which is just so unhealthy.
And it's yes, I'm glad you said that because it's an illness, right? It's a sickness, it's an illness, and so I go back to it's in some element of it. Without question, is shaitanic. Because it's the manufacturing of disbelief. Right? Because one of the things that a shaitanic paradigm promises is that there are no consequences. So you can do whatever, and it doesn't matter because nothing's going to happen. Right? So you can say whatever you want to say, you can do whatever you want to do if you can get away with it, and we know that that is a stark conflict with what believers believe. That no, that's not true because Allah said He's going to ask me about what my limbs did, what my mouth did. You know, so we have that. So then the struggle, we go back to proactively practicing safeguarding. All of these words are intentional because, you know, we have to take control of that, and it starts with us. Go ahead. You were raising your hand.
I've been I feel like having epiphanies the past 3 weeks, and it's a lot. I think it kind of spawned from this whole Bernie Sanders thing, and everybody was he should basically suspend his campaign. Everybody should fall in line behind Hillary at this point, in which basically only southern states voted, and southern states are in the Democratic states. But besides the point, I'm just making a statement that it's this kind of okay, now everybody fall in line, do what you're told kind of a thing, and I'm just this is poof, it's you know, once you're, it's almost like my sister always talks about veils, and how she, in different times in her life that Allah just removes the veil, and you're what am I doing, kind of thing. And this is what? I understand why people are independent voters, I understand why people don't even want to vote, I understand all of it now, because it's just you don't have you're not given the option to believe what you want to believe.
There you go.
And so this all kind of culminates in the needs to control people, right? And so what happens is that if you're not aware so if you're made to believe that this decision is actually a decision, it's not, then in order to kind of keep that going, you have to keep the people uneducated. And so now Donald Trump is a thing because you wanted to keep the people uneducated, and now he's kind of tapped into something that is more true to them than the garbage that you were filling them with. And it was only beneficial when they were uneducated and they were voting for you, but now when they're uneducated and voting for them. And so this happens on both sides. Absolutely. And so I was saying that what happens is that when people are uneducated and or deliberately not being educated so that you can control them, then you have to fill it with something else. So you fill them with reality TV, you fill it with gossiping, or you fill it with, you know, all of this beauty products, or, you know, whatever it is, music and all of this other garbage to kind of take the attention away from the fact that they're being kind of duped and like. So that's.
And so, and oftentimes, right? Because I understand exactly how you feel. It's part of what you said. It's at the heart of a critique that can be made against what we call education today.
Right.
Because, you know, television, for example, it's used oftentimes as a means to manufacture consent, manufacture opinions. So it's a pre-packaging, because every show that comes on television, I'm using television as an example, if you just look at the credits, right, oftentimes there's a team of writers. There's a team of folk that are masters of the written word. Not because if everybody could do it, everybody would, right? So there's a lot of deliberate intention behind what is usually the final result. So for example, Sister Stephanie mentioned the housewife shows, right? And, you know, just the popularity of these shows, and, you know, by Allah, I thought it was, I was curious, so I tried to look at, I couldn't finish one episode. Just because it's like, well, what is the intention of this? Like, what is this? Like, why is this okay? How is this entertaining? It's like, it's almost like the most ignorant behavior. And, you know, yeah, and it's like, and it's so, it always causes me to reflect on, so the opposite has to be true in the sense that we have to give care to how we talk. We should have, we should learn what it means. Like when we say meaningful conversations, meaningful engagements, what makes it meaningful? So in the spiritual context, what makes it meaningful is it reminds us of Allah. Because oftentimes that is your best protection. Sometimes all of the stuff that you said is true, and you can't do anything about that. Except to protect yourself with the immunity that Allah gave you. So that if you feel that a veil has been lifted, you thank Allah for lifting the veil, because so many folk don't have a veil, they have veils. Right? They have veils, right? And they just don't see it. And they're intelligent, and you know, they're accomplished, and they don't see it. You know, because so if you can connect it to what Allah says about how the devil operates, you know, smoke screens, mirrors, you know, misleading, you know, a little bit of truth mixed in with a lot of falsehood, right? And, you know, but nothing where it directs you back to you and Allah.
Right.
Right? And to lose focus of that is the biggest travesty. Right? And that's why a part of the goodness of our words is that we can educate people, help people, you know, challenge some of these notions, you know, have people think. Oftentimes people just, they don't think. I mean, how many times have we used the word thinking? And, you know, but thinking really is a deliberate process. So how many people really think about what they're doing, right? And that's something, Fatima, that's one of the things. So when we talk to the kids, right, that we put that in them early. Like, think about your life. Because sometimes people are just, you know, because when people are socialized, it's peer pressure, it's group pressure, you know, there's all kinds of things that, you know, people want to fit in. But go back to the maxim, silence and solitude. And I said the solitude, you know, socially, If I'm known to be a loner sometimes, what's up with that guy? We don't like us no more? Why are you not talking today? Right? And silence. It's a weird thing not to have nothing to say.
Yep.
That's really considered weird. Like every time I'm around that sister, she don't have nothing to say. She don't talk. Why is that weird? Like really? Like because, huh? It makes people uncomfortable because I gotta hear you saying something.
Right.
But why? Why do I have to hear you saying something? It's not about, it's not about that. It's not the act of saying something. It's what you're saying. Right? But if people don't filter that, if people don't see a value, right? And so these are the things that help us when we talk about proactively practice.
But then, Imam, it is a way of gauging too, because we feel that as long as you're talking, I know where you're at.
Right.
But when you're quiet, I don't know what you're thinking.
Right.
You could be doing anything.
Right.
So keep talking so I can have a feel of where you're at.
Yeah.
That's that uncomfortable part.
Yeah. That's so I've been invited. I've been invited to a session, leadership session with the Department of Homeland Security, right? And I'm actually, that's what I'm going to say, because I feel like if the Muslims aren't talking, then they're under suspicion.
Right.
I'm going to figure out how to say that.
Yeah.
Like, so you encourage the Muslims to talk, so you can get a gauge for where they're at. Right. I'm gonna figure out how to say that. I'm serious. I'm gonna figure out how to say it.
Good.
Because I have some just on it. Did you have your hand up too?
I did.
We both did, that's why I asked.
Oh, okay. So Fatima here first, and then.
Okay. This conversation that a person can consider a good conversation, or a conversation that needs to be had, that the receiver may not feel is a good conversation.
Okay.
So then you may hurt their feelings in saying something that you think needs to be said.
Right.
I'm going to use an example that I thought of. I remember at one time we had a couple of akikas, or people wanted to give akikas for illegitimate children.
Mm-hmm.
So having the conversation with a person about the illegitimate child, of course, not at the Akita, causes a problem.
Right.
Now, maybe later on, years down the line, they say, oh yeah, the sister was right. But until they get to that point, you having that type of conversation about future illegitimate or the possibility, they feel some kind of way toward you.
Right.
What do you,
But see, yeah, I'm glad you said that, because I oftentimes find myself in that position. So from the perspective of a person who speaks to the public a lot, I can tell you all kinds of stories about people who tend to personalize my words, even if I'm not talking to them personally.
Right.
Because oftentimes, the way they receive your words is a reflection of their state of mind and not your intention. Okay, because some conversations, I think you brought it up, some stuff has to be said. So that phenomena, right, of the misappropriation of this sunnah, so the aqiqah is a sunnah, right? So you know, to have aqiqah for a child that's, you know, for not the product of a marriage is problematic. It's a big problem, and it should not be viewed as a positive thing in the community, right? It doesn't mean that if somebody, you find out somebody does it, you bust it up, you're in there preaching, and y'all know this is haram. No, I'm saying, you know, because it's interesting that you mentioned that, because a few years ago, you know, we had a series of khutbahs here where that was the topic.
Right.
And trust me, Imam Anas heard about it. Like, people just got their feelings hurt. And we're like, well, why? Like, I didn't even know you would, like, now you put your business out there. I didn't, because that wasn't the intention. It was a critique of a phenomena that's happening that had to be addressed so that people could have an understanding that there's some things that you do and things that you don't do. So, and oftentimes this will happen in the context of a lecture, the context of a khutbah, the context of a class.
Right.
And oftentimes, and this is just from my experience, it's a reflection of the person, the person that's hearing, as opposed to your, because when you're delivering, you have the responsibility of crafting the words in the most appropriate manner, not personalizing stuff, not mentioning people's names, not mentioning things in a way that would help people be identified. And as long as you do that, that's the best that you can do. That's really all you can humanly do. If we're gonna, because some conversations are hard conversations. Some conversations are honest conversations. Some conversations are necessary conversations, particularly in the context of, you know, community reform or community, you know, addressing issues in the community, right? You're going to say things that are interpreted as, you know, hurtful, you hurt my feelings, you're singling me out, or because that, but that's often a reflection of where people are. So all you can do about that is your best.
Yeah, that, and it did encourage, I remember those, it encouraged some people to take that back home to their families and deal with the young people in their families, saying this has to stop.
Right.
You know, whether it stopped or not, you know, they put it out there, you know, and just like the imam being the point of the hurt, that person became the point of the hurt in the family.
Of course.
You know, and, you know, some people just never get over it. So it's sad.
Where about you?
So just in our talking, like on one of the things that I would add on the list of proactively safeguarding is guarding all of the entryways into our body, in our into our body, and then into our soul. Like, you know, the hadith of, I don't know, hadith number, where it says to guard what's between your lips and between your thighs and stuff like that. But I think that sometimes people don't realize that you take in things through so many different avenues, and that you have to safeguard them. So things that we see, things that we hear, like nobody would just stick something in their mouth and then not think of the poison that if it falls, or just stick something, you know, stick something or inject something in their skin. But a lot of times we just take things in and we don't realize we're taking things in. So what we hear, what we see, just being mindful that every entryway into our souls is a way of betterment or hurt. Like, you know, just being mindful of that.
Okay, so we have a little bit of time left. You had your hand up.
I just wanted to add on to what Dr. said. Two things. One point is, as a public speaker, do you not want people to think you are speaking directly to them, and that there is another point of communication which is spiritual? You can be talking to someone and you're touching their soul in a way that you have no idea. Allah's just using you, and you're talking about a subject and you're really painting somebody's heart. So I wanted to ask you to speak to that level of also that there's a spiritual entry with words.
Well, yeah, and so just in my experience, I found it to be extremely important. So, you know, traditionally, when the prophet spoke to people, he always started out with Alhamdulillah. So there's a framing of the conversation from the very beginning. And I found that in an official capacity, in the capacity of teaching, you know, when we started this class out, we learned the dua. We asked Allah to give us blessings with knowledge that is beneficial and allow us to benefit from the knowledge, right? That if I'm neglectful of that, the words tend to come out differently. Right? But because, you know, I mean, I have some funny stories about, like, I've been giving khutbahs for a long time. And so I have all kinds of stories. And sometimes people, like I remember specifically, so in my estimation, my delivery has evolved, right? So when I was younger, you know, people said that my khutbahs were fire and brimstone, right? And I'll never forget, I was downtown, I ran into a brother, and this is when I was giving the khutbah here, and the brother, we ran into each other, and I knew him, he knew me, he was like, oh man, how you doing? I haven't seen you in a long time. I said, I haven't seen you at Juma. So he said, man, can I be real with you? I said, yeah. He said, look, man, I got to tell you, man, I had to stop coming to the mosque. I said, why? He said, because, man, you used to get those fire and brimstone khutbahs, man, and you don't do that no more, man. I need you to hurt me. And I was like that. I was like, what? He said, man, when I'm out here doing my thing, you know what I'm saying? I need your voice in my head beating me up. Needless to say, I was floored. Like, so I'm in my mind, I'm evolving my craft, speaking more effectively. And this dude is telling me, beat me up. like, talk hard to me, man. Don't be using those nice words that you gotta tell me.
Don't pull no punch.
Right. Well, it wasn't even because, see, you can deliver a punch rhetorically. You can deliver a punch with a nice word, like she said. The same way that you can deliver a punch with a harsh word. But he wanted the harsh words, and I was like, wow. So just, you know, how people hear you, it depends on the state of their heart. Right. Most of the time, how they hear you. Right. Now, of course, that doesn't mean that we shouldn't be mindful of tone, context, the person that we're talking to. I mean, the Prophet ﷺ taught that. And Allah commended the Prophet on being empathetic. Because, see, the first thing is that if I'm saying something to you that I profess is in your best interest, I have to have your best interest in my heart, and not my best interest. Right? And that's learned. Because we all have our best interest in our heart first. And that's just our nature as human beings. Right? But the beauty of the words is that when I have your best interest, I'm going to take into consideration you, not just what I'm trying to get off my chest, not just what I'm trying to, you know, get my thing off on you. No, that your best interest, you know, because it may be, as Sister Fatima shared, and this is real. This is because sometimes we have to have these hard conversations with people that we care about. And they're just not doing right. And we have to find a way to tell them, and avoidance is never the answer. And what you find out, what you end up doing is, and I know it's benefited me greatly in my practice, is I say it. And however you take it, that's how you take it. Now, because when I say things, I try not to say things that I'm not willing to own. Right? I'm not going to just say any old thing. When I say it, I'm going to own it. So, you know, you can come and talk to me about it. right? And I have a funny story, right? So one time I was giving a khutbah to a congregation that was primarily not of people of color, right? Well, they were people of color, we call immigrant Muslims, right? And I just happened to talk about, so it was Hajj Malik Shabazz, Malcolm X, he was one of my childhood heroes, and it was his the anniversary of his death. And so I referred to him in the khutbah as Shaheed. And I shared with the congregation that, y'all are really sleeping. Like Hajj Malik, y'all need to know about this man. Right? And I said that, like the evolution that in his spiritual life, where he came from, where Allah took him and all this stuff. And, I thought it was a good khutbah. Because I never give a great khutbah. I thought it was a good khutbah, right? Because I'm always finding things in my khutbahs, right? So, but I thought it was good. And then I sat down after with the congregation. Brothers were coming up, talking to me, giving me salams and stuff. 2 hours later, I'm driving and my phone goes off. I get a text message. Then I get another one. Then I get another one. I'm like, what is this? So when I got home, I looked at the messages, and it's like a brother that was in the khutbah in row 3, because he identified who he was. I was the brother in row 3. No, he texted me, and he was like, I don't understand how you can glorify somebody who used to worship a man, and how can you say this, that, and the other? And I was like, I texted him back, I said, well, why didn't you say that to me? Why don't you just come in so we can engage in a conversation? And what part of what you learn is that in any type of public service, you can only do what you can do, because it's about your intention. You don't know what's in the person's heart. Right. You don't know what's in their head. You don't know any of that. All you know is what your intention is. And then you do your best in accordance to your intention, and inshallah you'll be good. Because otherwise, it's a fallacy to think that you're going to have the perfect words. It's a fallacy to think you're going to have the perfect time. All of that is a fallacy, right? And, it's best just to sometimes think about it, reflect on it, muster up the courage to say it, and sometimes you have to prepare yourself for the consequence. And you know what your intention was. If your intention wasn't to denigrate, to insult, to put down, then that's all you can do. Okay?
That's crazy.
Mm-hmm.
Most of the Sahaba was. I ain't going there. It's so interesting how it's a completely different perspective, basically because somebody's a different skin tone. If we even talk about people, their perception about Black Muslims and how we're not real Muslims because sometimes people don't practice, when sometimes their kids don't practice either, and they say, I don't know what to do with it, but they're still Muslim because they right.
But see that so you have to move past a place where that bothers you to the point of anger, to a place where it bothers you to the point of awareness that oftentimes what happens with my people, and I love my people dearly, which is why I work in my community, but I have experienced this firsthand, that my people have so oftentimes if somebody is from overseas, like, and they're from, what she said? What? Broccoli, right? That's real though. I'm telling you, there's a set of complexes. And when I look at those complexes, they all trace back to something that's in society that's in. What did she say? Take the time to get to know yourself. Everybody owes that to themselves. Take the time to get to know yourself, to know what Allah has brought you through, to know what Allah has brought you from, to know what Allah has blessed you with, to know that Allah didn't just test you with bad, but that your parents, your grandparents, your lineage, your experience, even before you were a Muslim. Because this notion that, and people throw this around, when you take Shahada, you become like a newborn baby. Right? The danger in just saying that without really explaining to people what that means. Because what it means is that you have ascended to a level of spiritual awareness that you didn't have before. Right? But it doesn't mean that you before Islam were nothing. And everything about you before you were Muslim is worthless. And somehow you have to remove the mind, the intellect, the experience that Allah gave you, throw it away, not just put it aside, throw it away, and replace it with somebody else's mind. Because that's oftentimes what happens. And I'm very passionate about that because it's very, very dangerous. It's in fact killing the people without killing them. That's how I feel about it. Right? So those, that's how dangerous it is. That's how dangerous. So I feel you with how it makes you feel, but to move past that, it's not about you. That's their problem. My predecessors, we were talking about the predecessors, and I said this in a khutbah a couple of weeks ago, right? So you can't talk to me about, and I was doing a lecture on extremism. And I was talking about how, first of all, for Muslims in the so-called West to really negotiate a better existence and a coexistence with each other, we have to look at the issue of authority. Who has the authority? Who has the voice? Right? And we have to move away from this notion that if it's not from somewhere overseas, it ain't no good. Because my father's people put that to rest when they sacrificed to go study Islam for themselves. And they didn't do that so that we could still be subservient to somebody else's agenda. So that's what ends up happening. We get co-opted. Some of us go on journeys for years, lost. Right? And Allah has blessed us to come from what we come from. We don't even know that we are a blessing. Right? It's like somebody said to me, and I use humor a lot. So I was with a group of scholars, right? And, we were talking. So I did every time I'm somewhere, I give a presentation about Islam in America, in the African American community, and oftentimes it's Sunni Islam, and they're like, oh my God, I didn't know that people like you existed. I said, you know that Allah exists, right? And Allah said that the deen is His, not yours. It's His. And Allah said He was going to take care of His deen. So maybe you're realizing that you didn't do your job.
But Allah says it's true.
Maybe I'm awake. Right? Because those are the notions that we have to challenge. And Quba Institute, this is why we focus so much on education, because it is a true means of upliftment. It is a means to lift the veils, and but it's education for us. And that's not nationalism as I define nationalism. It's just real. We can talk. Some conversations that we need to have. Right? So we ask them, yes,
If you,
no, No, go ahead.
I was just thinking of when you were saying about.
Just speak out the door. Is it your man or something?
He scares everybody.
No.
You what happened? He's not out there?
He's not out there.
Okay, go ahead.
So when you were talking about a conscious effort to manufacture disbelief,
Mhm.
I was thinking like it's kind of manifesting itself as a way that's trying to turn religion into a culture.
Right.
I think at least in America or in Western society, it's trying to make religion into a culture as opposed to a part of, as opposed to your life and how you live your life and stuff like that, trying to turn religion into, well, I should say trying to turn Islam, because I think it's already been done with Judaism and Christianity, but trying to turn Islam into outward practice, like your outward appearance, practicing of holidays on holiday sake and stuff like that. Like you truly assimilated into American culture when you can say, when you can bottle your Islam into this, okay, I look like this, I do this, but not the everyday aspects of your life. It's kind of seen as extremism. If you like, oh my gosh, you can't miss a prayer. Like what, you can't just, okay, so what? Why you got to right now? You know,
Right.
or we're having this meeting and it's Ramadan and there's going to be food. Okay, just, you don't have to fast that day. Like, what's the big deal? That type of thing. I had jury duty one time and I got selected and I was on the panel. And we had to, go to lunch and stuff like that. And I spent like half my lunchtime trying to find a place to pray. And I came back, and when I got back, I knew the guy, like the judge was like, they were saying, be back in this room at this time or whatever. So I'm going all through the courthouse trying to find a place to pray. So finally, I went to, I guess, the jurors, whatever the office, the people that handle the jury and stuff like that. And the guy who I later found out was the head of the department, he let me pray in his office. And he was like, this is the first time this has ever happened. And I just was looking like, that should be something that y'all should take into account. If you have people from, I didn't say this, I'm not trying to get all this. But,
That's smart though.
No, but I was just thinking, like, if you have people from all walks of life, and you commit them to this is something you have to do as, a member of society, blah, 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 blah. If you really, truly are trying to embrace the people of your community, then there should be a place. Like, lots of government buildings have a meditation room or whatever, something like that, but just that should be a part of it, just kind of, I'm not going off tangent, but.
That's okay. Just so you know, those little breakout rooms in the federal court building, you can go ahead and lock the door.
Oh, you can actually lock the door?
Do they allow you to do that? Or?
You said the federal court building.
Yeah.
She was a CJC probably.
Yeah, I was. With like.
There's a difference between the federal court building and criminal
I'm talking
justice.
one on 13th and
Filbert?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, those breakout rooms.
You can lock the door.
Yeah. Cause Quba the lawyer.
Yeah.
I was down there one time. That's people praying there.
Okay.
Yeah.
And who was with Suede?
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. That's good to know.
Yeah. You hear somebody knock, which
but she does bring up a point that we should think about, and I appreciate the honesty, right? Because those are the days that we live in. These are the days that we live in, right?
Yeah.
Where it's a strange thing. I remember a Q&A, and I was talking to people about the average daily life in a Muslim. They asked me to give a portrait, right? And I talked about praying 5 times a day. And they just were like, you pray 5 times a day? Every day? Like you don't miss a day? And so one person said, are you a fundamentalist? I was like, what does that mean? What is a fundamentalist? What does that mean? Because I flipped it back. Like, you brought that up. What does that mean? Because people hear these words, and they're oftentimes loaded words, and they go back to the agenda of those who want to reduce religion to a cultural thing. A part of that that's problematic, even within the Muslim context, is when we have these notions of idealized religiosity, right? So oftentimes our conversations don't move beyond food, clothes, because we have as long as you are dressed a certain way, you good, sister. Don't matter what's on the inside, right? And if a sister's not dressed the same way, then she's suspect. What's going on? And that's problematic. Why? Because we're dismissive of the person. Because we have this idealized thing that we're looking for. Not that dress, there are rules for dress for men and women. There's diet rules for men, but those aren't the purpose of the deen. And you can be taken away from the purpose of the deen. Lastly, because he is out there.
You see him?
Yeah, I see.
Okay, maybe I should wait then.
Don't be scared.
I'm just gonna say real
His
quick.
older brother, he got me short.
Last night at family night, a guy pulled up out front with a truck, a big truck, tractor trailer. He just had the tractor. And he said he stopped because he saw a masjid on it. And I got out the car to ask him to move the truck because we usually park. He said, "What's going on here?" I said, "Family night, we have activities, blah, blah, blah." He said, "You all Muslims?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "I'm Muslim." I said, "Where are you from?" He said, "Uzbekistan."
Wow.
I said, "Alhamdulillah." He said, "But I'm driving a truck and blah, blah, blah." We talked about Hajj, we talked about a lot of different things. But he said, "My brother prays 5 times a day." I said, "Yeah." I said, "You pray 5?" He said, "No, I don't pray." I said, "Why?" He said, "Because in America, I'm driving this truck, I'm trying to make this money, and I don't have time." And alhamdulillah, I was able to tell him, I said, when I was a truck driver on the road, I used to pray. I would pull over on the side of the road and pray. I would pull in a rest area and pray. I would carry bottles of water to make wudu so I could pray. I said, "Brother, you have to pray." He said, "It's hard." I said, "You have to do it." I said, "What's first?" He said, "Prayer." I said, "No, Allah is first."
That's right.
Allah is first. So
I'm glad you brought that up.
I felt like he was sitting here.
In the modern world, money is God. In the modern world, and not that money doesn't have its worth, its value. We want it, but it's not God.
Right.
And that's the danger. That's another one of the dangers.
We had a guy tell me one time that by him not being a Muslim country, he didn't have to pray.
And that's how I felt this guy felt.
You know, because I'm in the MSA, right? I was on the Timber. So I said, "Come on." He said, "Yeah." I said, "You pray?" He said, "I ain't got to pray." I said, "What? I'm not a Muslim country."
Okay. May Allah protect us. Protect us, our children, our progeny, because the struggle is real. It's a real struggle. And the struggle against Shaitan is real. Allah protect us from that. So the very last thing, and Imam Anas is going to tell you, so this is our last class. This group will be meeting back up in the early fall. But between now and then, there will be a couple of Deen intensives. Imam Anas is doing a special session for Arabic. He's going to tell you about it soon, like in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, he told
Oh, he told you already. Okay. And we have a Deen intensive for the brothers. I will be having a Khatib training that's open to sisters. So the information is forthcoming. So.
This is the last class?
Yes, sir.
You was in last class?
That's a long time. We bought the gifts for everybody in class. Everybody got their last class gift.
Oh, you brought gifts?
Yeah, we bought gifts for everybody got it.
I get a pick?
Yes.
More money,
That's
more
fine. You gotta give me, you gotta pick something and give it to me.
Pick something to bring in.
Give him a prayer.
Yeah. Right.
Oh, that's what I said.
Yes, exactly. Oh, yeah. Okay. All right. So inshallah, I will see everyone. Perfect time.